Hello, my name is Sue Mon, and today we're going to take a look at the biblical Hebrew meaning of the word barley. This has been a very interesting study for me, and it's opened my eyes to many things. So just like our history is divided into before Christ, BC, and after Christ, so are the believers. There are believers before Yeshua, and then there are believers after Yeshua. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the barley itself. There are 9 stages of growing barley. The first 8 stages are germination, seedling development, tillering, stem elongation, boot, head emergence, flowering, and milk development. After that, the 9th stage, or the ripening stage, has 2 parts: hard to divide kernel and cannot dent kernel. So barley and wheat were planted in the autumn and ripened in spring. Barley matures faster and is harvested sooner. The first fruits of grain offered during the festival of unleavened bread would have been barley. In the early stages of the Israelite settlement, the most important cereal was barley because of the necessity to settle fringe areas and barley's tolerance to harsh conditions. So when you look at the Hebrew history of the Jewish people, you see that all of these stages are a part of their history, and that they were the ones that would be coming first to the knowledge of what God had for them. And they were tough, and they were very tolerant of a lot of different situations that they were put in, not always faithful, but they tolerated a lot of harsh conditions. In order for the Israelites to know the seasons, they would look at the barley harvest. When the barley was in the first stage of harvest, the next new moon would be the beginning of a new year and spring, Aviv. If the barley was not harvestable, then it would be the next new moon that would start a new year. So the ground would be the signal for the seasons. So the barley harvest would take place when the barley was ready to harvest, of course. So since their calendar was based on the moon, the seasons would be out of order if they didn't correct it in some way, just like we have leap year. So here's the months, and as you see, when you get down here, you get to Adar. So what they would do, they would go and check the barley on the Temple Mount. If the barley was ready to harvest, the first part of the harvest, then they would go on, and the next month would be Nisan. But if the barley was not ready, that meant the ground was not ready, that spring was not here yet, then they would add another month. So in a Jewish leap year, an extra month is added after the month of Shabbat and before the month of Adar. It is called Adar Aleph, or Adar Rishon, which is first, or Adar 1. The month of Adar is then referred to as Adar Bet, Adar Shani, or Adar 2. According to Jewish tradition, Adar is a lucky and happy month. So just like we have a leap year that corrects our seasons, they have a month where they add. And then after this, Adar Bet, then they go to Nisan. So let's look at the Feast of First Fruits. What happened on the Feast of First Fruits? Leviticus 23:10 says, "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, when you have come into the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the Cohen." Leviticus 23 says, "And you shall offer on that day, when you wave the sheaf, a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord." So on Feast of First Fruits, they were to bring the first of their harvest and an unblemished lamb as a sacrifice. Newly harvested grain could not be eaten until the first fruits of grain had been offered on the day after the Shabbat of the festival of unleavened bread. Pentecost, near the end of the grain harvest, included grain and offering loaves. Pentecost was also known the Feast of Harvest. but this was the beginning of the wheat harvest. So you'll see Feast of First Fruits two places. You'll see it right after Passover, and that was the Feast of First Fruits of the barley harvest. And then they also call Shavuot Feast of First Fruits sometimes, but that was the beginning of the wheat harvest. So let's look at what happened the day Yeshua died. Matthew 27:50 says, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. And at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tomb after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Jesus said, so we know this is kind of unbelievable, but at this time when Jesus died and there was an earthquake, many of the Old Testament saints were resurrected, and they went into the holy city and they appeared to many people. So then Jesus was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. When he came out and Mary found him in the garden, she wanted to go up and hug him, but he said to her, do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God. So at this point in time, he had not yet ascended to his Father. And one of the reasons was that the high priest could not be touched once he had been made pure and clean. He could not be touched before he went into the Holy of Holies, or he went in to sacrifice or offer the Feast of First Fruits. So he had to be untouched. So here Jesus was basically telling her that he was going to be going to his Father, and he was going to offer his first fruits in his life as the unblemished lamb. But then a week later, he comes back and he says to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believing. So now he had been to his Father. He had taken all those resurrected holy people, saints that had been risen from the grave. This was like the first rapture, where he took all of the Old Testament saints up to heaven and offered them to God as the Feast of First Fruits, and himself as the sacrificed lamb. Now he was back and he could have people touch him. This was a fulfillment of Leviticus 23:13, a sheaf of barley and the unblemished lamb presented before the throne. At Christ's death, a strong earthquake occurred, splitting rocks. Truly, the death of Christ was a powerful earth-shaking event with repercussions affecting even the creation. A third event mentioned was recorded only by Matthew. The tombs of many holy, righteous people were opened. The NIV suggests that these saints were resurrected when Jesus died and then went into Jerusalem after Jesus' resurrection. A number of commentators agree with this view. However, their resurrection did not occur till he was raised. In this view, the phrase after Jesus' resurrection goes with the words were raised to life and came out of the tombs. This is possible in the Greek and is suggested by the King James Version and the NASB. The tombs then broke open at Christ's death, probably by the earthquake, thus heralding Christ's triumph in death over sin, but the bodies were not raised till Christ was raised. So this is just another opinion that showed that this is probably what happened. Another one by Volvard says this event suggests a fulfillment of the Feast of First Fruits of Harvest mentioned in Leviticus 23:10-14. On that occasion, as a token of the coming harvest, the people would bring a handful of grain to the priest. The resurrection of these saints, occurring after Jesus himself was raised, is a token of the coming harvest when the New Testament saints will be raised. So at this point in time, everyone before Yeshua who were righteous people were then taken to heaven with God and presented before the throne room of God. Therefore, the sheaf of barley, or the Old Testament believers, and the unblemished lamb that had been sacrificed, Yeshua, were presented before the throne of God, thus fulfilling the Feast of First Fruits, and thus showing that the believers in God before Yeshua were actually a picture of the barley. Next time, we're going to look at the counting of the Omer. Thank you, and hope to see you next time.